Amara Bennett attended an estate auction in New Orleans. The items were from an old horror house that had closed after the owner died. She walked past furniture and decorations. Then she saw a chair covered in aged leather. She moved closer. On the armrest was a small cross tattoo. On the seat back was a distinctive birthmark. Her uncle Leon had that exact tattoo, that exact birthmark. He'd been missing for 14 years. She touched the leather. The texture was wrong. Because it wasn't leather, police were called. And what they discovered changed everything. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you the story. New Orleans, Louisiana, October 15th, 2015. Amara Bennett pushed through the crowd gathered outside the old Blackwood Manor estate. The auction preview was packed. Curious locals, antique dealers, horror memorabilia collectors. Everyone wanted a piece of New Orleans' most famous haunted attraction before it disappeared forever. The manor had been a fixture in the French Quarter for 20 years. From 1995 to 2015, thousands of tourists had walked through its halls every Halloween season. Blackwood Manor, the most realistic horror house in the South, famous for props so lifelike they made people scream. Now its owner, Gerald Thornton, was dead, and everything inside was being sold. Amara was 22, college student at Tulane. She'd never been to Blackwood Manor when it was operating. Too young, too scared. But today, curiosity pulled her through those iron gates. She'd grown up hearing about this place. Friends who'd visited described it in terrified whispers. The realistic props, the detailed sets, the feeling that something was genuinely wrong about the place. Not fun scary, actually disturbing. Her roommate had tried to convince her to go once, back in 2013. Come on, Amara. It's just a haunted house. Everyone says it's amazing. But something about it had made Amara uncomfortable. She'd declined, made excuses. Now, with the place closed and Thornton dead, her curiosity had finally won out. The auction house had set up stations throughout the property. Furniture, decorations, props, all tagged with lot numbers, all ready to be sold to the highest bidder. Amara wandered through the first floor, past mirrors with ornate frames that reflected her distorted image, past tables that looked ancient, surfaces scarred and stained, past lamps with strange shades that seemed almost translucent in certain light. Everything had that gothic, creepy aesthetic, perfect for a horror house. Other preview attendees moved around her. A dealer, examining a mirror frame with a jeweler's loupe. A collector photographing props for online resale. An elderly couple reminiscing about visiting the attraction in its early years. "Remember how realistic everything looked?" the woman was saying. "I swear I thought that coat rack was going to reach out and grab me." Her husband chuckled. "Best haunted house we ever visited. That Thornton fellow was a real artist." Amara moved past them into what used to be the manor's main parlor. The room was large, high ceilings, tall windows, now letting in afternoon light that seemed wrong for the space. Like the room was designed for darkness, and the sunlight was an intrusion. Then she saw the chair. It sat against the far wall, an ornate piece, high back, curved arms, claw feet. The whole thing upholstered in what looked like distressed brown leather. Aged, textured, cracked in places like old material gets when it's been used for decades. But something about it drew her closer. Something she couldn't name. A feeling in her stomach, a tightness in her chest. The upholstery had an unusual pattern, not just aged material. There were shapes in it, textures, faces, almost, stretched and flattened, worked into the surface. Their eyes were gone, just hollow indentations, shadows where eyes should be. The expressions were pulled tight, frozen in the material. The craftsmanship was crude but effective, creating the impression of silent screaming. Decorative, she thought. Creepy artwork to fit the horror theme. Amara moved around to the side of the chair, ran her hand along the back. The texture was strange, not quite like leather, softer, more pliable. She moved to examine the armrest. And her world stopped. There, on the material of the armrest, slightly faded but clearly visible, was a small tattoo. A cross, simple design, black ink turned slightly blue-gray with age, exactly like her Uncle Leon's tattoo. Amara's heart started pounding. Blood rushed in her ears. She leaned closer, touched the armrest with trembling fingers. The texture was wrong. Too soft, too warm, too pliable, not like leather should feel. Not like any furniture she'd ever touched. She remembered her Uncle Leon, remembered him rolling up his sleeve to show her the tattoo when she was 6 years old, explaining that he'd gotten it in the army, that it represented his faith, that it had kept him safe during the war. "See this, Amara?" he'd said, pointing to the small cross. "This reminds me that I'm not alone, even in the darkest places." The tattoo on the armrest was identical, same size, same placement, same design. Amara moved to look at the seat back. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold herself steady. There, on the upper right section of the upholstery, was a birthmark, distinctive shape, irregular, like a small continent, dark brown against the lighter background. Uncle Leon had that exact birthmark on his back. Amara had seen it countless times. Summer barbecues when he'd take off his shirt, swimming at her cousin's pool. In old family photos from before the war, her mother had shown her those photos hundreds of times, especially after Leon disappeared, pointing out every detail. The way he smiled, the scar on his knee from falling off his bike as a kid, and that birthmark, always that birthmark, distinctive, unmistakable. Amara's vision started to blur. Her breathing became shallow. She looked closer at the chair, at the leather, covering it, at the joinery holding different sections together, at the faces pressed into the material, at the seams where different pieces met. This wasn't leather. This was organic. This was him, and she was looking at her Uncle Leon, the uncle who disappeared 14 years ago when she was 8 years old, the uncle her mother had been searching for ever since, the uncle whose missing person photo hung in their living room next to photos of him in uniform, the uncle they'd never stopped looking for, the uncle they'd held a funeral for with an empty casket because there was no body to bury. He'd been here the whole time, turned into furniture, turned into a horror attraction, turned into something people sat on. Amara's scream started deep in her chest, rose through her throat, burst out into the auction preview. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, silenced the murmur of other attendees, made everyone turn and stare. She screamed again, and again, couldn't stop, couldn't breathe, couldn't think, only knew that her Uncle Leon was this chair, and she'd almost touched him, almost sat on him, almost treated him like furniture. Auction staff rushed over from every direction. Security guards, the auction manager, Natalie Crane, other attendees backing away, frightened by Amara's screaming. "Ma'am, are you all right? Are you hurt? Did someone attack you?" Amara couldn't answer, couldn't form words. She pointed at the chair with a shaking hand. Her whole body was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Natalie knelt beside her. "Ma'am, what's wrong? What happened?" Finally, Amara found her voice. "That's my uncle. That's Leon. That's his tattoo. That's his birthmark. That's him." Natalie looked at the chair, looked back at Amara. Her expression shifted from concern to confusion. "I don't understand. This is just a chair, a prop from the horror house. It's not. Look at the armrest." Amara grabbed Natalie's arm, pulled her closer to the chair. "See that tattoo? That cross? That's my Uncle Leon's tattoo. He got it in the army. And look at the seat back, that birthmark. That's his birthmark. I've seen it my whole life. That's him. That's my uncle." Natalie examined the chair more closely, saw the tattoo, saw the birthmark, saw how detailed they were, how realistic. "Ma'am, I understand these props can be very realistic. That's what made Blackwood Manor famous. But this is just upholstery, designed to look disturbing. The tattoo and birthmark are probably just—" "No," Amara cut her off, voice stronger now, desperate. "My Uncle Leon Bennett disappeared in 2001, 14 years ago. I was 8 years old. My mother has been looking for him ever since. We filed missing person reports, hired investigators, put up posters, called shelters and hospitals and morgues. We never stopped looking, and he's here. He's been here the whole time. She touched the armrest again, made herself do it even though every instinct screamed to pull away. Touch it. Please. Just touch it and tell me that feels like leather. Natalie hesitated, then reached out, placed her palm on the armrest where the tattoo was visible. Her hand jerked back immediately. That's not right. That doesn't feel like leather. Because it's not leather, Amara whispered. It's him. It's organic. This chair is covered in my uncle. The words hung in the air. Other people had gathered around, listening, staring at the chair with new horror. Natalie stood up, face pale. I need to call the police. Right now. Everyone, please step back from this item. Don't touch anything. She pulled out her phone, made the call. While she spoke to emergency services, Amara pulled out her own phone, hands still shaking, called her mother. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Her mother's voice, familiar, safe, and Amara broke down crying again. Mom, you need to come here. Right now, please. Amara? Baby, what's wrong? Are you hurt? I'm at the Blackwood Manor auction, the old horror house. Mom, I found him. I found Uncle Leon. Silence on the other end. Then her mother's voice, sharp with sudden emotion. What? Amara, what are you talking about? What do you mean you found him? His tattoo, Mom. The cross. And his birthmark. They're here. On a chair. Please just come. Please. I need you. I'm coming. Don't move. I'm coming right now. Amara hung up, sat down on the floor, stared at the chair, at her Uncle Leon, at what he'd been turned into. Natalie was calling someone else now, the appraiser who'd been cataloging all the furniture. Other auction attendees were leaving, uncomfortable, disturbed, sensing that something terrible was unfolding. A few stayed, curious, horrified, unable to look away. Amara didn't move, just sat there staring at the chair, trying to reconcile what her eyes were seeing with what her mind knew had to be true. Uncle Leon was dead. Had been dead for 14 years. And someone had done this to him, turned him into furniture, into a prop, into something people would sit on and admire and call realistic. She thought about all the people who must have touched this chair, sat in it, admired the craftsmanship, complimented the detail, never knowing who they were touching, never knowing they were touching a stolen life. The thought made her stomach turn. She leaned over and was sick on the floor. A staff member rushed over with paper towels. Amara waved them away. She couldn't accept comfort right now. Couldn't accept help. Could only sit and stare and wait for her mother. Rochelle Bennett arrived 30 minutes later. She burst through the auction house doors, found Amara sitting on the floor, ran to her daughter, pulled her into a tight embrace. Where is he? Where's Leon? Amara pointed at the chair without speaking. Rochelle stood slowly, walked toward the chair like she was approaching a wild animal. Cautious, terrified. She was 42 years old, Leon's older sister by 6 years. She'd helped raise him after their father left. Watched him graduate high school. Watched him enlist. Watched him deploy. Watched him come home changed. Watched him struggle. Watched him end up on the streets. And watched him disappear. For 14 years, Rochelle had searched. It had consumed her life. Every spare moment, every spare dollar, every ounce of hope she had. She'd filed reports with police every month, called every shelter in the city, visited hospitals, checked morgues, followed up on every possible sighting, every rumor, every lead. Police had told her to stop, told her Leon was an adult, had the right to disappear if he wanted, told her that homeless people moved around, that he'd probably gone to another city, that she needed to accept it and move on. But she couldn't, wouldn't, because Leon wouldn't just leave. Not without telling her, not without saying goodbye. She'd always known something bad had happened, had felt it in her bones, in her heart, in the way mothers and sisters know when someone they love is gone. But she'd never imagined this. Could never have imagined this. Now she stood in front of the chair, staring at the armrest, at the small cross tattoo that she'd watched Leon get when he was 19. Remembered going with him to the tattoo shop, holding his hand while the artist worked, listening to him explain what it meant to him. She looked at the seat back, at the birthmark she'd seen 1,000 times, the birthmark that had been there since he was born, that their mother used to kiss when Leon was little, that Rochelle had teased him about when they were kids. "That's Leon," she whispered. Oh God, that's my baby brother." Her legs gave out. She collapsed. Amara caught her. Both women on the floor now, holding each other, crying. Natalie stood nearby, phone in hand, not sure what to do. The police were on their way, so was the appraiser. But right now, there was only grief, only horror, only the terrible understanding of what had been done. Other staff members had cleared the auction preview, sent everyone home, closed the doors. The manor was quiet now, except for the sound of Rochelle and Amara crying. Curtis Hayes arrived 15 minutes later. 35 years old, professional antiques appraiser. He'd been hired by Gregory Sullivan, the new owner of Thornton's estate, to catalog and photograph everything for the auction. He'd examined this chair 3 days ago, sat in it, ran his hands over the upholstery, admired the craftsmanship, made notes about its condition and estimated value, photographed it from multiple angles for the auction catalog. He'd noted it as Victorian-style armchair, unusual upholstery, Gothic design, decorative face motifs, good condition, estimated value $2,000 to $3,000. Now Natalie explained the situation, showed him the tattoo, the birthmark, told him about Leon. Curtis's face went pale. He approached the chair slowly, knelt beside it, examined the upholstery with professional attention to detail. After several minutes, he stood, looked at Rochelle and Amara. "I cataloged 47 pieces of furniture from this estate," he said quietly. "I touched every single one, examined them closely, made detailed notes, photographed them. And I never suspected, never even considered that they might be, that they might contain." He couldn't finish the sentence. "The texture," he continued. "I thought it was just unusually soft material. High quality, well maintained. The temperature seemed slightly warm, but I attributed that to the room temperature. The decorative faces seemed like skilled tooling, embossing, artistic detail. I admired it. I wrote in my notes that the craftsmanship was exceptional." Curtis looked sick. "I sat in this chair, leaned back, tested the stability. I touched your uncle, and I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Rochelle looked up at him. "You couldn't have known. No one could have known. That's what he wanted. That's why he did it this way. To hide them. To make them into something people would admire, instead of something people would investigate." "Who was he?" Amara asked. "The owner. Who did this?" "Gerald Thornton," Curtis said. "He died in March, heart attack, 72 years old. He owned Blackwood Manor for 20 years, ran it by himself, no employees, no partners. Did everything alone. We need to examine everything," Curtis continued. "Every piece of furniture from this estate. If this chair contains, if he did this to one person, he might have done it to others." The thought made everyone go quiet. One victim was horrifying. The possibility of more was almost incomprehensible. Police sirens approached outside. Detective Xavier Mills was about to arrive, and the investigation was about to begin. Detective Xavier Mills had been a homicide detective for 15 years, had worked in New Orleans PD for 25 years total. He'd seen violence, death, horror. The city had its share of darkness, but this was different. He arrived with Dr. Vincent Clark, the medical examiner. Both men examined the chair, while Rochelle, Amara, and Curtis watched. Dr. Clark was methodical, put on gloves, used portable lights, magnifying equipment, took samples of the material for laboratory testing, examined the stitching, the texture, the way different sections were joined together. The faces pressed into the upholstery weren't decorative, he realized. They were real. The material had been treated carefully, preserved, flattened, then stitched into the upholstery. The eye sockets weren't carved or molded. They were natural indentations. The mouths weren't sculpted. They were natural features, pulled tight and fastened. After an hour of examination, Dr. Clark removed his gloves, looked at Detective Xavier, then at the family. "This is preserved organic material," he said. His voice was professional, but Amara could hear the strain underneath. "The upholstery on this chair is made from biological sources, from multiple individuals. I can see at least 3 different tones, different textures, all preserved through a complex process, then joined together to cover the chair frame." Rochelle made a sound like an animal dying. Amara held her tighter. Dr. Clark continued gently. "The faces you see aren't decorative. They're actual biological remnants, preserved, flattened, then incorporated into the upholstery design. I'll need DNA testing to confirm specific identities, but the tattoo and birthmark you described match what you're seeing here. This very likely contains material from your family member." "How long?" Xavier asked. "How long have these remains been here?" "Years, Doctor," Clark said. "Possibly decades. The preservation is remarkable. Professionally done. Whoever did this had expertise, knowledge of anatomy, of chemistry. This wasn't amateur work." Xavier looked around the auction preview, at all the other furniture waiting to be sold. Tables, lamps, mirrors, more chairs, decorative pieces. "We need to examine everything," he said. "Every piece of furniture that came from this house. If he did this once, he might have done it multiple times." Curtis nodded. "I cataloged 47 items total, all from Thornton's personal collection, all used in the horror house attraction." "Then we examine all 47, Xavier said. "Starting now, this auction is cancelled. This entire estate is now a crime scene." Over the next 2 days, Dr. Clark and his forensic team examined every piece of furniture from Blackwood Manor. They worked in shifts, around the clock, methodically going through each item, using X-rays, chemical tests, microscopic examination, DNA sampling. Amara and Rochelle stayed at a hotel nearby. Couldn't go home, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. They waited for updates, for information, for the terrible truth to fully reveal itself. Curtis stayed with them, brought food they couldn't eat, coffee they couldn't drink, sat with them in silence, felt responsible somehow, even though intellectually he knew he couldn't have known. "I should have realized," he kept saying. "Should have noticed something was wrong." "How?" Rochelle finally asked him. "How could you have known? You're not a forensic expert. You examine antiques, evaluate them. You had no reason to suspect furniture would contain people. No one would suspect that." "But I touched him," Curtis said, voice breaking. "I sat in that chair. I admired the craftsmanship. I wrote about it in my catalog notes. I called it exceptional work. And the whole time, you didn't know," Amara said firmly. "And Uncle Leon wouldn't want you to feel guilty. He'd want you to help us now. To help us figure out what happened. To help us find answers." Curtis nodded, wiped his eyes. "I'll do whatever you need, whatever helps." On the second day, Detective Xavier called them to the manor. His face was grim, exhausted, aged by what he'd discovered. "We've completed the examination," he said. 15 pieces of furniture contain biological remains. The number hit like a physical blow. 15. Not 15 victims, Xavier clarified. 15 pieces of furniture. Some contain remains from a single individual. Others are assembled from multiple individuals. Dr. Clark estimates at least 22 victims total. Rochelle sat down hard. Amara couldn't breathe. 22 people, 22 human beings, all turned into furniture, all displayed in a horror house for years, all touched by thousands of visitors who never knew. Xavier showed them photos, documentation, the other pieces, an ottoman upholstered in material from 2 victims, different tones stitched together in a patchwork pattern, a large, ornate throne, 3 victims' faces pressed into the upholstery, their essence covering the entire chair, their features still visible, eyeless, silent. A dining table with legs carved from a dense, white material. The structures had been cleaned, treated, reinforced with metal rods, covered in decorative carving to disguise what they really were. A lamp with a shade made from thin, stretched material. So thin it was almost translucent when lit. The light shining through revealed the texture, the delicate patterns, the reality of what it was. A mirror with an ornate frame, decorated with small structural fragments, small segments arranged in decorative patterns. A coat rack constructed from larger structural segments, painted to look like wood, joints reinforced with metal, item after item, horror after horror. All the victims are still being identified. Xavier said, DNA testing takes time, but we've already confirmed several. All African American, all adults, ages ranging from late teens to mid-40s based on analysis. Who were they? Amara asked. Do we know? We're cross-referencing with missing person reports, Xavier said. Preliminary results show all of them disappeared from New Orleans between 1995 and 2010. All were homeless, runaways, or working on the streets at the time of disappearance. All had missing person reports filed. All cases went cold. Rochelle closed her eyes. Society's invisible people. Yes, Xavier said quietly. People the system failed. People whose disappearances weren't investigated thoroughly. People whose lives were treated as less valuable, and someone took advantage of that. He pulled out more files. We found Thornton's workshop in the estate basement. Tools, chemicals, preservation equipment, and journals. Detailed journals dating back to 1995. He documented it? Curtis asked, horrified. Everything, Xavier said. Every victim, every step of the process, every piece of furniture. He was proud of his work, considered it art. Amara felt rage building beneath her grief. Can we see them? The journals? Xavier hesitated. They're evidence, and they're disturbing, extremely disturbing. I don't care, Rochelle said. My brother is in those journals. I need to know what happened to him. I need to know the truth. Xavier nodded slowly. All right, but I'm warning you. These are difficult to read. Take your time, and I'll be here if you need to stop. He brought them to a conference room, laid out copies of the journal entries. The originals were already with the forensics team. These were photocopies, but the words were the same. Thornton's handwriting was neat, precise, almost artistic, like the writing of someone educated, cultured, not the scrawl of a monster. But the words revealed exactly what he was. The first entry was from October 19, 1995. Successful completion of first acquisition. Subject was male, approximately 30 years of age, experiencing homelessness. Encountered near the shelter on Burgundy Street. Offered food and warm shelter. Subject accepted readily. No suspicion. Brought him to workshop via service entrance. Process went smoothly. Minimal struggle. The end was quick. Have decided to pursue this methodology. Why create fake props using latex and foam when authentic materials produce superior results? Visitors will never know the difference. But I will know. I will know that my work is genuine, the most realistic horror house in America, because it is real. The clinical language, the casual description of taking a life, the pride in his work. Amara read entry after entry, her hands shaking, her stomach turning. Each entry documented a victim. Each one described the hunting, the lure, the act, the preservation, the transformation into furniture. Thornton had targeted homeless individuals deliberately, studied their patterns, knew where they gathered, knew they were vulnerable, knew they wouldn't be missed. Or if they were missed, their cases wouldn't be investigated thoroughly. He documented his preservation methods with the precision of a scientist. How he processed the materials while keeping them intact. How he treated the surfaces using traditional chemistry. How he stretched the material over furniture frames. How he joined different pieces together when he needed more coverage. The structural elements he cleaned meticulously. Treated them, studied anatomy to understand structural integrity, incorporated them into furniture where they would bear weight, where they would function, where they would last. He wrote about visitors touching his work, sitting in his chairs, admiring the realism, complimenting his talent. "They tell me it's the most realistic haunted house they've ever experienced," he wrote. "They touch my chairs and marvel at the texture of the upholstery. They examine the white chandelier and ask about my casting techniques. The secret makes every compliment sweeter. They are touching death, and they don't even know it. They are sitting on the truth and calling it art. I am the greatest horror artist who has ever lived, because my work is real, because I have transformed the worthless into the valuable, given them purpose, made them beautiful." Rochelle found the entry about Leon, October 12, 2001. She read it 3 times, each time more devastating than the last. New acquisition completed. Subject identified as LB. Male, 28 years of age. Military veteran. PTSD documented. Currently experiencing homelessness. Encountered near the riverfront. Offered temporary work and shelter. Subject was grateful, trusting. Mentioned having a sister who worried about him. Process went well. Minimal struggle. Subject was in poor physical condition. Malnourished. Likely made the end easier for him. Material quality excellent despite circumstances. Minimal scarring, except for military tattoo, cross design on left forearm, and distinctive birthmark on upper back. Will incorporate both into chair upholstery. The tattoo adds authenticity. Character. A story. No one will recognize it as real. They will think it's decorative detail. Artistic choice. Perfect addition to the collection. Rochelle put the paper down, looked at Xavier. "He wrote about my brother like he was materials, like he was leather, like he was nothing." "I know," Xavier said quietly. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Amara kept reading. Found entries about other victims. Each one as cold, as clinical, as proud. A young woman named Kiara, 24, runaway, used for the Ottoman. A man named Elijah, 31. Mental health crisis had left him homeless. His physical structure used for the table legs. Name after name. Life after life. Person after person. All reduced to materials. To components. To furniture. Curtis read the entries with them. His face getting paler with each page. He found entries where Thornton described displaying the furniture, watching visitors interact with it. October 28, 2003. Halloween season in full operation. Over 300 visitors tonight. Many sat in the new throne. Complimented the detailed faces and the upholstery. Asked how I achieved such realism. I told them trade secrets. They laughed. One woman said the faces looked so real they gave her nightmares. I thanked her for the compliment. She touched the armrest. Ran her hand over SJ, never knowing, never suspecting. This is transcendence. This is art at its highest form. He watched people touch them, Curtis said, voice hollow. He enjoyed it. Got pleasure from people unknowingly touching his victims. From the secret, from the deception. Amara felt rage building. Grief and horror and rage all mixed together. He operated for 20 years, right here in the French Quarter. Thousands of people visited. No one suspected. No one questioned. Because homeless people disappearing isn't news, isn't investigated, isn't valued. Xavier's jaw was tight. I pulled the missing person reports for every victim we've identified so far. Every single one had a report filed. Family members, friends, shelter workers. Someone cared enough to report them missing, but the investigations were inadequate. Officers made assumptions, noted transient lifestyle in the files, concluded they'd likely moved to another city. Cases were closed within weeks, sometimes days. He looked at Rochelle. Your brother's case is typical. You filed the report October 15, 2001, 3 days after he disappeared. The investigating officer noted Leon's military service, his PTSD, his homelessness. Concluded he'd likely traveled to another city, possibly seeking new opportunities. Case was closed November 2nd. Less than 3 weeks of investigation. Rochelle's voice was bitter. I called that officer every month for 2 years, begged him to keep looking. He told me Leon was an adult, had the right to go wherever he wanted, told me I needed to accept that he'd moved on, that I was wasting police resources by calling. Eventually, he stopped taking my calls. That officer retired in 2008, Xavier said. I can't make him answer for his failures now, but I can tell you this. The investigation should have been more thorough, should have lasted longer, should have taken your concerns seriously. The department failed your brother, failed all these victims, and I'm sorry. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. Acknowledgement, admission of failure, a promise to do better. What happens now? Amara asked. To the furniture? To Uncle Leon. The furniture is evidence, Xavier said. It will be held until the investigation is complete. Then it will be destroyed. The remains will be returned to families for proper burial. When you're ready. Rochelle nodded. I want him cremated. Can't bear the thought of burial after what was done to him, but I want him home, want him with family, want him to rest. We'll make sure of it, Xavier promised. All 22 victims will be identified. All families will be notified. All remains will be returned. That's my commitment to you. Over the next week, the full scope of Thornton's crimes was revealed. DNA testing identified all 22 victims, all African American, ages 19 to 45. All disappeared between 1995 and 2010. All from New Orleans. All homeless, runaways, or struggling on the streets at time of disappearance. All had missing person reports filed. All cases went cold. The media coverage exploded. National news, horror house furniture made from human remains, 22 victims over 20 years, displayed publicly in a tourist attraction. Questions flooded in. How did this happen? How did no one notice? How did Thornton operate for 2 decades without being caught? The uncomfortable answers pointed to systemic failures. Police who didn't prioritize missing person cases involving homeless individuals. A society that treated vulnerable people as invisible. A system that allowed people to disappear without thorough investigation. Xavier began the difficult task of contacting families, knocking on doors, making phone calls, delivering news that was simultaneously terrible and the answer to years of prayers. Some families had been searching for 20 years, others for 10, 5, 2, all with the same desperate hope that their loved one would be found alive, that there would be a happy ending. Instead, there was this, the truth, the horror, the knowledge of what had been done, but also, finally, answers, finally, closure, finally, the ability to stop wondering and start grieving properly. Rochelle and Amara attended several of the notifications, wanted to support other families, wanted to share their experience, wanted to help however they could. They met Patricia Edwards, Kiara's mother. Patricia was 62 now, had been searching for her daughter for 18 years since Kiara disappeared at 24. I knew she didn't just leave, Patricia said, crying, holding Rochelle's hands. I knew something happened to her, but police said she was an adult runaway, that she'd probably moved to another city, started a new life. They told me to let her go, but I couldn't. She was my baby, my only child. I couldn't give up on her. They met Vincent Porter, Elijah's father. Vincent was 70 now, had been searching for his son for 16 years since Elijah disappeared at 31 during a mental health crisis. He had schizophrenia, Vincent explained. We were trying to get him treatment, but he didn't qualify for the programs, didn't have insurance, ended up on the streets. I was still looking for help when he disappeared. Police said he'd probably wandered off, that mentally ill homeless people do that. Case was closed in 10 days. 10 days, and I've been searching ever since. Story after story. 22 families. 22 people who'd been loved, who'd been missed, who'd never been forgotten despite what society assumed. Amara listened to each story, felt the weight of each loss, and felt rage building. Not just at Thornton, but at the system that had enabled him. The society that had failed these people twice. Once when they became homeless, again when they disappeared. She called a meeting, invited all the families she could reach, asked them to come together, to support each other, to share their grief and their rage and their commitment to change. Curtis helped arrange it, found a church willing to host them, set up chairs in a circle, provided coffee and tissues and space for people to break down. 20 families came. Some brought multiple members, mothers, siblings, children, partners, all people who'd been searching, all people who'd never given up. They sat in a circle, introduced themselves, told their stories, and slowly, painfully, they began to heal together. The memorial service for Leon Bennett was held on a cold December morning, gray skies, rain threatening, the kind of day that matched the mood. Rochelle had chosen cremation, couldn't bear the thought of traditional burial after what had been done to Leon. The urn was simple, bronze, engraved with his name and military service dates. The church was packed, family, friends from before Leon's service, members of the veteran community, people from the other 21 families, community members who wanted to show support, to show that Leon's life mattered, that his death mattered. Amara stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, at her mother in the front pew, clutching Leon's urn, at Curtis sitting beside her, at Detective Xavier in the back, at all the people who'd come to honor her uncle. She'd written a eulogy, spent days on it, revised it a dozen times, but standing here, looking at that urn, the prepared words felt inadequate, so she spoke from her heart instead. Uncle Leon was a person, she began. I say that because it seems like we need reminding. He was a person, not furniture, not a prop, not a horror attraction, not a victim, a person. Her voice grew stronger. He was born in 1973, grew up in the lower 9th Ward, loved basketball, was terrible at math but great at art, drew pictures for everyone, made my mom laugh when she was sad, protected her from bullies at school even though she was bigger than him. He joined the army when he was 19, served 2 tours in Iraq, came home in 2000 with medals and scars, physical scars and psychological scars. He had PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks. The war followed him home in ways we couldn't see, in ways we didn't understand how to help. Amara's voice caught. He tried to adjust, tried to find work, tried to build a normal life, but the trauma was too heavy, too constant, and our system failed him. Failed to provide adequate mental health care, failed to support veterans properly, failed to catch him when he fell. He ended up on the streets, not because he wanted to, not because he chose it, but because he was sick and our system abandoned him. My mom tried to help, offered him a place to stay, money, support, but Leon's pride wouldn't let him accept. He said he didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to drag us down with him. That was Leon, always thinking of others, even when he was suffering. Tears ran down her face. In October 2001, he disappeared. My mom filed a missing person report, called police every week, every month, for 14 years. Police told her Leon probably moved to another city, told her homeless people do that all the time, told her to let it go, to move on, to accept that he was gone. But she never did. She never stopped looking, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing he was out there somewhere. And she was right. He was here, right here in New Orleans. The whole time, Amara's voice hardened. A monster named Gerald Thornton took my uncle, turned him into furniture, displayed him in a horror house for 14 years. Thousands of people touched him, sat on him, admired him, never knowing they were touching a human being, never knowing they were touching my Uncle Leon. But Uncle Leon wasn't just taken by Thornton. He was failed by all of us, by a society that doesn't value homeless lives, by a police system that doesn't investigate their disappearances thoroughly, by a mental health system that abandoned him when he needed help most, by everyone who walked past him on the streets and didn't see him as a person worth saving. She looked at the other families in the church. Uncle Leon was one of 22 people. 22 lives, 22 stories. All of them failed by the same systems. All of them victims of the same monster. All of them turned into furniture and displayed for entertainment. But we're here today to say no more. To say these lives mattered. To say their names. To honor their memories. To commit to change. To building a system that values every life. That investigates every disappearance. That treats homeless people as human beings deserving of dignity and respect and justice. Amara's voice rose. Uncle Leon, you deserved better. You deserved care for your PTSD. You deserved housing. You deserved a thorough investigation when you disappeared. You deserved to be found while you were alive. You deserved justice. We failed you. Society failed you. But we're not failing your memory. We're using your story to push for change, to help others, to make sure no one else is forgotten the way you were forgotten, to make sure every missing person matters, every life is valued, every family gets answers. She walked to her mother, placed her hands on the urn. We found you, Uncle Leon. After 14 years, we brought you home. And now you can rest. You're with Grandma. You're free from pain. You're finally at peace. And we promise you. We promise on your memory. We will make sure your death means something. We will change the system. We will help others. We will make sure you're remembered not as furniture, not as a victim, but as Leon Bennett, veteran, brother, uncle, person who mattered, person who is loved, person who will never be forgotten. The church was silent except for crying. Rochelle's sobs, other family members weeping, community members moved by Amara's words. After the service, they went to the columbarium. Leon's urn was placed in a niche next to his mother's ashes. Finally, mother and son were together again. Rochelle placed flowers in the holder beneath the niche, touched the nameplate. I'm so sorry, baby brother. Sorry I couldn't save you. Sorry the world failed you. But you're home now. You're with Mama. And I'll visit every week. I'll tell you about the work we're doing, about the changes we're making, about how we're making sure you didn't die for nothing. Amara stood beside her mother, both women crying, both grieving, but also finding a sliver of peace. After 14 years of not knowing, they finally had closure, could finally say goodbye properly, could finally let Leon rest. The weeks that followed were a blur of funerals, all 22 families laying their loved ones to rest. Rochelle and Amara attended as many as they could, supporting families, bearing witness, building community from shared tragedy. The media attention began to fade. Other stories took over the headlines. The public moved on, but the families didn't, couldn't. They continued meeting weekly, supporting each other, sharing memories, planning for the future. Amara threw herself into the work, changed her major to social work, focused her studies on homeless services, mental health, systemic advocacy. She worked with Curtis to establish a nonprofit, Homeless Missing Persons Advocacy, dedicated to helping families navigate missing person investigations, to pushing police to investigate thoroughly, to keeping cases active, to making sure no one was forgotten. They got seed funding from private donors moved by the Blackwood Manor story, applied for grants, built relationships with police departments, created protocols for thorough investigation of homeless missing persons. The work was hard, progress was slow, but it was something. It was action. It was purpose, drawn from tragedy. Rochelle joined the effort, took early retirement from her job, devoted herself full-time to the nonprofit, used her 14 years of searching experience to help other families, to teach them how to navigate the system, how to push for answers, how to never give up. The 22 families became the nonprofit's founding board, each bringing their experience, their perspective, their commitment to preventing other families from suffering the same way. Detective Xavier became an ally, worked with them to develop new police protocols, required thorough investigation of every missing person case regardless of housing status, mandatory follow-ups, regular case reviews, homeless liaison officers to build trust with the vulnerable community. It wasn't perfect, wasn't enough, could never undo what had happened. But it was change. Real, measurable change. Progress built on tragedy. Hope born from horror. Amara visited Leon's niche every Sunday without fail, brought flowers, talked to him about the work, about the families they were helping, about the changes they were making. "We're making a difference, Uncle Leon," she'd say. "Your death wasn't meaningless. We're using it to push for change, to help people." 16 missing persons found in the last year because of thorough investigation. 16 families got answers, got their loved ones back. Because of you, because of what happened to you. I hope that means something. I hope you can rest knowing that. The nonprofit grew. More funding, more staff, more families helped, more missing persons found, more lives valued, more change made. It would never be enough to balance the scales. 22 lives lost could never be replaced. 22 families' grief could never be erased. But it was something. And sometimes, something is all you can ask for. 3 years passed. October 15th, 2018, third anniversary of the discovery. The Blackwood Manor property had been demolished, too contaminated by death and horror to ever be used for anything else. The city purchased the land, converted it into a memorial park, the Garden of Light. Where Gerald Thornton's horror house had stood, there was now green space. Trees planted by each of the 22 families, flowers in beds maintained by volunteers, benches for quiet reflection, walking paths winding through the garden. And at the center, 22 granite monuments, one for each victim. Each monument bore a name, a photo from life, a brief biography of who they were before society failed them, who they were before Thornton took them. Leon Bennett's monument showed his military service photo. Young, proud, in uniform. The inscription read, Leon Michael Bennett, 1973 to 2001. United States Army veteran, Iraq War, 1998 to 2000. Beloved brother and uncle. He served his country with honor. Amara stood with her mother looking at the monument. Curtis beside them as always. Detective Xavier present. Dr. Vincent Clark. Representatives from the mayor's office and police department. All 22 families gathered together. The third anniversary memorial service was smaller than previous years. More intimate. The media had moved on completely, but the families remained. The commitment to remembering remained. The work continued. After official speeches from city representatives, Amara stepped forward, 25 years old now, confident in ways she hadn't been 3 years ago, shaped by grief and rage and determination into someone stronger, someone committed to change. She looked at the gathered families, at the monuments, at the garden that had replaced horror with hope, and she began to speak. 3 years ago today, I recognized my uncle's tattoo on a chair at an auction. Changed my life forever. Changed all our lives forever. She gestured to the monuments. We learned that 22 people we loved had been taken, turned into furniture, displayed in a horror house, used by thousands of people who never knew they were touching human beings. The horror of that discovery will never leave us. We'll never stop hurting. We'll never be okay. But we've chosen to do something with that horror. We've built this garden, created this memorial, established our nonprofit, changed police protocols, helped families find their missing loved ones, pushed for systemic change, honored our dead by helping the living. Amara's voice strengthened. In the 3 years since discovery, our nonprofit has helped 87 families navigate missing person investigations. We've assisted in finding 43 missing individuals, 43 people brought home to their families, 43 cases that might have gone cold if we hadn't been there to push for thorough investigation. That's 43 families who didn't have to search for 14 years like my mother did. 43 families who got answers, got closure, got their loved ones back alive, or at least got their remains for proper burial. That's not enough to balance what we lost. 22 lives can never be replaced. But it's something. It's change. It's progress. It's our loved one's legacy. She looked at each monument. Uncle Leon, Kiara, Elijah, and all the rest. You deserve so much better than what happened to you. You deserved care, housing, investigation, justice. We failed you. But we're not failing your memory. Every person we help find is because of you. Every family we support is in your honor. Every protocol change that values homeless lives is your victory. Every life saved is your legacy. You are loved. You are remembered. You are honored. Not as victims, not as furniture, but as people, as family, as human beings who mattered then and matter now and will always matter. The families gathered around the monuments, each placing flowers, each touching stone, each saying a name, each remembering. Amara and Rochelle stood at Leon's monument longest, mother and daughter, survivors of unimaginable horror, warriors for justice and change. We did it, Uncle Leon, Amara whispered. We built something good from something terrible. We turned your death into life for others, into hope, into change. I think you'd be proud of that. She touched the cold stone, felt the engraved letters of his name under her fingers. Rest in peace. You are home. You are loved. You are remembered. Always. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, planted by grieving families. Birds sang in branches. Life continuing, the world moving forward. The Garden of Light stood where horror once operated, where death had been hidden, where human beings had been reduced to objects. But now it was transformed. Sacred space, memorial, living tribute to 22 people who'd been failed by society but never forgotten by family. Their names carved in stone, their stories told, their memories honored. Their legacy lived through the work of helping others. Leon Bennett, Kiara Edwards, Elijah Porter, and 19 others whose names would never be forgotten, whose lives would always matter, whose deaths would always mean something, because their families refused to let them be forgotten, refused to let their suffering be meaningless, refused to accept that society's failures were inevitable. Instead, they built change, created hope, honored the dead by helping the living. And in doing so, they transformed horror into something almost like redemption. Not healing, never healing, the wounds too deep for that, but purpose, meaning, legacy, love. Sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes, that's all we can ask for. Sometimes, that has to be enough. And in the Garden of Light, surrounded by family and memories and commitment to change, it was.